Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, indivisible.
Okay. First thing, approve the agenda. Anyone have any additions or changes or to the agenda?
No. I'll make a motion to approve as is.
I'll second.
I got a motion by Dave Bruzek, second by Pat Scripture to approve the agenda as is. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes. Agenda is approved. First thing, easement purchase agreement. Who's taking this, Ken?
I will take that. As a little background information, if the council was or wasn't aware, it's very common within street and utility reconstruction projects that staff has to obtain a number of different easements, many of them temporary, just for matching in grades to properties. But we also do have a number of minor permanent easements that are typically obtained. In the past few years, generally those have been on corner lots, and particularly in the old part of town, we have had historically very square curves on the radiuses of the curbs. And in order to kind of widen that out to make a more gradual turn, we've had a number of small kind of triangle easements for permanent purposes that we've gotten on these corner properties. And never had to pay anybody for those easements in the past because it really hasn't affected the usability or the setbacks or anything of that sort that affected the property use. In the case of this year's project, we did have one easement that did involve a 430 square foot easement onto property owned by Jeremy Tupy and Lori Hughes, which is the back and neck clinic property on Main Street East. The city actually did obtain a temporary easement on the corner of their property, again for that radius situation to be corrected, and obtain that permanent easement at no cost. In the case of this year's easement, and I do have a drawing in your packet, the situation with the property is there was an existing sidewalk on the south side of School Street, basically just to the east of First Avenue Northeast towards the St. Wentz property. With the reconstruction project, we actually had to move the curb to the south, and the sidewalk was a very insignificantly wide sidewalk. It didn't meet our minimum standards. So between the curbway shifting to the south within the right-of-way and the need to put the wider sidewalk in place, we needed to obtain a permanent easement to get that connectivity from the sidewalk system we've been building up to get people over to the church. The property owners argued, because the B1 zoning district allows buildings to be built right up to the property line with no setback, that the easement was affecting the use of their property, and therefore asked for compensation of the permanent easement. City staff did discuss a request for payment of the easement with City Attorney Scott Riggs. We talked about the best course of action simply being a negotiated sale price for the easement with the property owners, rather than go through a condemnation process where we have legal and appraisal fees that would far exceed the value of that small 430 square feet of property. The city and the owners were able to negotiate a sale price of $2,000 for that property, which does equate out to about $4.65 a square foot. Staff does feel that is an appropriate price for the easement that would allow the sidewalk to be installed and allow people to walk on the public sidewalk over to the church property and back and forth through that area. We do have the executed copy by Mr. Tupy and Ms. Hughes for your review in the packet here tonight. Excuse me. And staff does recommend approval of the easement purchase agreement to document this. And again, at least during my time, and I don't know how long prior to that, but I've been in the city of New Prague for 10 years working on these easements. I've never had a situation where we had to do any compensation, but this is honestly the first one I've run across where there was an effect on the use of the property however minor, but this did affect the use of that property because they wouldn't be able to build right to the edge of the property anymore, so.
Did we widen School Street when we moved, or did we just move it for the,
Probably a real good question for Chris Cabot.
do
You
you,
can be
do
much
you have
more
a better
specific.
curve into the alley?
He did a very nice job explaining that, by the way. Yeah, the street was widened about 2 feet. It was actually so substandard. In fact, it's fairly narrow still the way it is, but that gave us a little bit more width that we really needed to get two-way traffic in there, buses, and really needed a few additional feet basically to get the sidewalk standard that we needed in there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is that entire street city street? I thought part of it was private.
At this time, technically, it all is, but the intent is to vacate from the alley east. So the public way will be from on School Street, from First Avenue to the alley and then the alley. That's the public way. Everything east of that is the intent is to vacate that with this project after it's over. And it'll become private, and they do have intentions to redo their parking lot at that time, next year, I believe.
Was the sidewalk part of the original project to put it in all the way?
Up to the alley and match into their existing with the plan that they were going to reconstruct and do parking lot improvements in the future and extend that. And they have expressed an interest to do that, continue the same standard of the cities, a 6-foot wide sidewalk behind the curb.
But this is going past the alley, right?
Basically right up to the alley. Actually, in fact, we've fallen a little bit short right now because they've got to do some things to make it match in, so they're actually going to finish, it's a couple panels short of the alley. They'll actually finish that with their project. But yeah, basically we were completing it within the public portion of the right-of-way.
I'm not picturing it or something.
The sidewalk could go right up to the,
You know where that garage is that's on the south side of School Street, right before you get to the church? There's a 2-car, 3-car garage there that the church uses.
But it's going all the way to that one downhill from
nope,
the
No.
not that far.
Okay, 'cause
No.
that's what it looks like.
It's about a
The
half
alley
a
that goes
block.
to the hospital.
Half a block west. It goes to the end of the alley there, but like Chris said, there's a couple panels short. But we're only buying up to their property line, which is actually short of the alley.
Yeah, up to their property line, yep.
Okay. And who's going to shovel this sidewalk in the winter? Is that the city or?
To the council to determine that. Typically it'd be the property owner, who's the adjacent owner.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess I look for a motion to approve the purchase of the easement.
So move. Second.
I got stereo going on here. Mark Bartuszczyk made the motion, Dave Brusick seconded. If there's no other further comment, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Passes 5-0. Next, Chris, are you going to take this about the landscaping?
I believe I am.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, members of the City Council, before your consideration is a change order number 1 for the City Hall landscaping improvements, which was all done as part of the 2013 project, last year's project. There were 3 items that needed to be taken care of. Basically, after it had been constructed, we were able to realize some additional work was needed. It was work that we could either had Chard do last year with last year's work, have them do it as additional work. However, we decided it was more convenient to negotiate it with D&J Landscaping to have them do it. And as I noted here, we needed to extend some of the boulder wall that had been done. The amount that we had initially planned for wasn't enough to basically make things fit properly. We also had, with the June rains, we had some erosion in the rain garden, and in hindsight, looked like we needed a little more spillway riprap, and they had come up with a great idea to add some additional field stone to accommodate that. So it was essentially work that we needed to do in hindsight, and we're able to negotiate reasonable prices with them. And these were items that were not part of their original bid. So again, we had no way to pay for them other than to do this by change order or work order. So the amount of the existing, we're proposing a modification of the contract of $960. This would be an increase on the contract. However, I should note that we are expecting some minor savings. There is a lot of plant material that obviously went in there, and it looks to be that we may not need to install it all. There's pretty good density right now, and they've got about 100 and some plants that look like we may not need to do. So that's something we're going to evaluate here in the next few days. Just for your information, there was some remaining work. If you happen to notice, they were back again today. There were remaining material that had been installed. A lot of it got, I think, back in June, things weren't as big as they needed to be, so not everything got planted then. And then there was some material that they were having trouble getting, and they have since acquired that material, and a lot of that, most of that was planted today. So the majority and nearly all of the work is now complete. We're just negotiating whether or not to, what do we do with this last 100 or so plants, whether we need to incorporate those. So I guess with that, I guess I entertain any questions. Otherwise, you have got that resolution for consideration.
What was the original, do you remember what the original bid was? I mean, were we below?
They were low, the prices on your...
Yeah, the original contract was $22,623. With this revision, it'll be, I believe it's on the second page of your memo there.
Third
Okay.
page.
Or third. Okay, and then the revised contract would be $23,583. And again, I believe the final will actually be less than what we're showing as the revised contract, because there'll be some plant material that we're going to not need to install.
And if it is more, where do we get the money from?
We actually, I believe the estimate that was plugged into the budget was upwards of about 30,000. So we're under budget with what was there in the project bid to begin with.
Yeah, that's what I guess what I was kind of getting to.
The low bid came in lower than what the budgeted amount was for the entire project. And what I mean by that is that when we put together the financing for the project, which was ahead of the bidding on this part of it, is we actually had a higher estimate from the engineer that we included in our financing. So any savings that we have at the end of the project after we pay all the bills will ultimately go towards the debt service account.
We already have money for it.
Yeah, this was included in the overall project costs.
Well, I wanted to know.
Okay,
Make a motion that we approve the 960.
I'll second it.
okay, motion by Sean Ryan, second by Pat Scripture to approve the change order number 1 for additional cost of $960. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. Are you taking the next one also, Chris?
I don't know, am I, or?
I'll introduce it, and you can add, since you were the inspector of record, that what you have here tonight is a resolution basically accepting the work for the Chart Inc. Open Ditch Realignment Improvement Project that was done around, as you take a look at the map, around the western, northern, eastern side, all the way across the property of what was an open existing ditch that empties underneath First Avenue Northeast as part of the Chart Improvement Project. The grant from the state of Minnesota was for $313,005, which is basically a 50% grant. The balance of that is to be matched by Chart. The contract is between the city and the state under the grant agreement. Chart undertook the project, publicly bid it, constructed it with, let's see, their contractor, Chris, I gave you, was SM Henges and Sons. for all of the replacement or installation of new storm sewer piping around the perimeter of this project. For those that know or recall that there's a drainage ditch on the west side of Highway 13, just north of the intersection of County Road 37, 6th Street Northwest, and Highway 13 in the northwest corner of that intersection. That pond drains into the state ditch underneath the highway over to Chart, and then it drained under Chart's building and came out the east side. This grant enabled us to allow Chart to relocate that out from underneath their building and around the perimeter of the building. And then it also put in place with that which was conveyed through an open ditch system now into an existing storm sewer system that runs the perimeter of that site that I just mentioned, as well as going underneath the railroad tracks. We were able to get permits from the railroad, and all of the work was completed this last year. This action basically accepts the project, now allows us to submit all of the final paperwork to get reimbursed. When we get reimbursed under the outline of what we will submit on behalf of Chart, that reimbursement then will be passed on to Chart, since they encountered the whole expense for the entire project.
Okay.
So,
Does this, then the stormwater run into that low area behind those houses? Is that where they?
On First Avenue?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay. Any questions? I guess I'll make a motion to accept the ditch realignment improvement project sign off so that we can close this chapter with the Chart project.
Second.
Second by Sean Ryan. Any other further questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. Moving right along. Do we really have to talk about snow and ice in August?
well, it
I
means
thought
money.
that's your favorite time of year.
My favorite time of year is talking about it, that's right.
In front of you is the agreement for the snow and ice removal on Main Street with MnDOT. As I noted in the memo, years ago, they used to pay us by the hour, and they wanted out of that. And then after talking to them 2 years ago, they decided that they'd come up with a contract that they're going to pay us $4,000 a year for 2 years. And that contract came up, so I just met with them a couple months ago, and we asked for a little increase, and they gave us a little increase, $4,200 per year with a 2-year contract, which at this point is still pretty good. We're the only city that they still pay for snow removal on Main Street. They're responsible for the center line of Main Street. We're responsible for the parking lanes from Highway 21, 13 to Lexington Avenue South. So on a normal snow year, that $4,200 works out pretty good. We had a year like last year, and then we're losing money, but you know, there's not a lot we can do about it. I think we're pretty confident, or pretty lucky that they're giving us $4,200. So I guess staff recommendation is that you approve the contract for the next 2 years for $4,200 a year, and hope they renew it again in 2 years.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, Glenn, how many communities actually have a major highway running through their main street? I couldn't think of any that.
I wouldn't be able to give you an
Mankato would, but-
exact count. There's, I know Nicollet down south is one of them that MnDOT helps them clean that.
Yeah, that's right.
I would think St.
You'd
Peter.
have Jordan
St. Peter would too,
Peter.
and Peter.
but I've always seen the highway department do that.
And that's the thing here in New Prague is the highway department says, we'll come and clean your parking lanes. Could be a week or two after the snow event, whenever we get all our stuff done. Well, we're not waiting for that. We can't wait for that. That's just not fair to the business owners. So that's why we've always been able to work this agreement out with MnDOT, and they've always sat at the table, and they've always been, you know, to this point, pretty good about it, so.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the agreement, maintenance agreement.
Second.
Motion by Dave Brusick, seconded by Mark Bartuszczyk. Any other further comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, are you taking this? No.
Yeah.
Come on. Take the microphone down so that we can hear you.
I'm sorry,
Hey,
I probably should have read it.
Well, this first thing to all the people that are going to be watching this is Mark Prosapka. He hasn't been here for a while. He's our chief of police, and we're glad that he decided to grace our presence today. So,
Yes, well, the memo obviously was made by Sergeant Garis with Mike's help, but I wasn't involved in any of the actual interviewing or anything, just kind of was around there. But the interviews were done. It says there are 102 applications. We actually got, I think, 2 of them like 3 weeks later than the closing was, so Jim didn't count those. They did a bunch of phone interviews with the 27 of the applicants and then narrowed it down to 10. If I recall right, 2 of those people backed out, so ultimately they interviewed 8 people and chose Richard Droog, that currently works for the city of Waterville on the police department for the last 7 years and is also firefighter EMT for the city of Elysian. Due to that experience and the posting of the position with the salary range, it was decided to start him at step 2 of the 2014 wage agreement with the LELS, which is a small raise from what he currently is apparently making in Waterville. The memo says that to prove it with the exception of a non-disqualifying result from his drug screening. I was informed by Mike this morning that he had gotten the drug screening and it's nothing found. So, like I said, that's taken care of. So he will begin on August 11th. He'll meet with Patty for maybe a half a day or whatever to get all the paperwork in order and then get some of his equipment issued to him and then start field training with the other officers and will be a good fit. I spoke with them and I was very, very confident with the people that Jim had on the interview panel, which was Sergeant Nick Greenick from Leesburg County and Captain Steve Collins from Scott County, along with Tim Applin and John Madigan from our department here. And all of them were impressed. I spoke with the sheriff of Leesburg County, who personally knows Mr. Droog and had nothing but good things to say about him, and spoke to some other detectives from Leesburg County Sheriff's Office, and they also had nothing but good to say. And actually, the sheriff told me that we got a good pick. So
now Waterville's going to be mad at us?
I guess.
At the next
Yeah,
Seward County officials meeting, we can probably expect to hear.
Yeah, I'll have to bring extra cash for that one, won't I? So. Again, the recommendation, mayor and council review an appointment of Mr. Rich Droog as a police officer per the recommendations listed above, without the condition of the medical, or the drug screen, I'm sorry. Any questions?
I guess I have one. Mark, the field training, will he ride with another officer then for
Yeah.
a period of how long?
We normally go about 10 weeks. But due to his familiarity with the Leesburg County court system, jail system, different parts of that, the human services, the child protection, it will get shortened up a little, just because we don't have to take him over to the jail and show him where it is and show him the courthouse because he's been there. So it will help a little.
Okay. And then budget-wise, we're okay with that? Because then we'd have essentially an extra officer on for those 10 weeks where we might only have in a normal
No, you'll have
And then
a-
you'd have two
You'll have an
officers?
additional officer for about 2 weeks.
Oh, just 2 weeks, okay.
Right.
All right,
Because then I will be leaving the end of August. So if he starts the 11th, that'll be about 2 weeks.
okay, okay. Oh, that's right, because you would be retiring yourself
Right.
then, so that, okay. I see what you're
And
saying.
it should work out budget-wise.
Okay.
Pretty good, I think.
Okay,
Basically, if you could recall from the hires, that obviously with the promotion from Jim from sergeant to chief, that's at a lower pay grade on the existing system. The sergeant patrolman moving up to a sergeant is at a lower level than what Jim was at, because he was at, both he and Mark were at top grade. And then the same thing as we move the patrolman out of the top spot in the patrol, this one's coming in at step 2. All of them are at lower tiers within the whole budgetary system, so.
Any other questions for Mark or?
So that means, Mr. Mayor, that we can go out and have a party with all that money we're saving?
I can't agree to that right now.
Oh.
Might have to be a closed-door session or something. If there's no other comments or questions,
I'll make a motion to accept the appointment of Mr. Richard Droog as police officer.
Second.
a motion by Dave Brusing, second by Pat Scripture, to accept the appointment of Mr. Richard Drew as our new police officer with no conditions. So there's no other comments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay.
And that finally concludes the hiring chaos that Mark has put us through in the last few months now that,
Went well for me.
That's all that accounts, Mark. We appreciate that. Next, police cars, squads.
Yes, and I guess that's mine also. Sergeant Garis again put this together. He's on vacation, so he wasn't able to attend here, but same as the last 2 years, we spec'd it out with New Prague Ford and with the Nelson Auto Center, the from Fergus Falls, who's the state contract price. You can see that New Prague Ford is $149 greater without subtracting the trade-in. The trade-in wasn't considered from Nelson Auto because apparently they wanted to physically see the vehicle, and we weren't going to take it up to Fergus Falls. And then we would also have to deliver it. If they were successful, we would have to bring it back up there.
We'd eat up that $149 just doing that.
I think so.
Yes.
That'd be just lunch and stopping on the way. So the New Prague Ford total minus the trade-in is $23,041. Again, it's the same vehicle as the last two that we have ordered and received, and it's going to replace one of the 2011 Ford Crown Victorias that anticipated will have approximately 95,000 miles on it when it comes time to actually change it out. And the budget for the vehicle was $26,000. So the recommendation is authorize the purchase of the 2015 Ford utility from New Prague Ford for the bid of $25,841 and trade in the 2011 Ford Crown Victoria for $2,800.
Looking at his replacement schedule, obviously we'll have one Crown Victoria left in the fleet,
Correct.
and based on the schedule, that would probably be replaced next year.
Correct.
So then we would have all the same vehicles, the utilities, the all-wheel drives.
Correct.
Is there a way, in your opinion, to, since they're exact identical, to work it so that, you know, you're spreading the miles around and replacement wouldn't have to be as frequently?
Definitely. Some of the guys still like the Crown Victoria. Obviously, when it's not available, we will, Jim will try to, we had talked about that, of seeing which ones are getting, because even though they're all going to be the same, the officers kind of pick a vehicle, and that's the one they like to use. And Jim will have to make sure that that's getting spread out. And I just noticed too, he did this vehicle replacement, that 2007 Expedition is not, we don't currently own that. That was the one we traded in last year. He must have missed that on the replacement schedule.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I've got a comment, I guess. You know, I hear all the reasons why we should be replacing these cars every year, but when I've gone down and looked at other communities, what are they driving? I see an awful lot of Crown Vics still on the road. Now, they've been not produced now for, would be coming up the 4th year. I can't believe that all those cars out there have less than 100,000 miles on them. So I really have an issue with putting out and buying a new car every year, Mark.
The idea is to, once we get through some of these, we went from a 3 rotation car or year car to a 4-year rotation. So the cars will be getting stretched out further. They're also going to be driven more because of the all-wheel drive. When we still have the Crown Victorias, but we don't have the Expedition. The Crown Vics would usually get parked on snowstorms and not getting used because they couldn't get around very well. The other thing, I don't know what specific communities you're referencing, but I know there has been communities, large and small, that bought Crown Victorias and parked them. And their mentality on that was to continue or extend the replacement of the equipment that goes inside of it, because they may have bought some new equipment that's not transferable to these utilities. So they bought more cars to shelve them or shed them so they can continue to use them. I know, like Shakopee, I just noticed yesterday, I saw a Crown Victoria, I also saw a utility. But in Scott County, there are very few, and in LeSueur County, there are very few, and I don't know about, obviously any other communities I don't go to too often. But you're not going to see many Crown Victorias around unless they bought them, extra ones.
Well, the ones I'm seeing are still in the Highway Patrol.
Highway Patrol, that State Patrol, those vehicles are assigned to those troopers individually.
Yeah, so they don't put on as many miles.
They don't put on as many miles, and it has been proven is that if a vehicle is assigned to a particular person, it's going to last longer because they take better care of it. They know if the brake feel changed. They know if the tires are needing wear or have more wear. Where a pool car like what we have, it may not seem out of the ordinary to one officer, where it might seem out of the ordinary to a different one because he might use it all the time. But yes, patrol, you're going to see those Crown Vics fade away very quickly with the State Patrol. They're turning them over, and part of their deal too was that equipment to roll it over. Some of their cars that they're still using, I do not know if the state of Minnesota bought extras to put someplace, because some of the troopers that I know have gotten the utility. Well, they went with the sedan, but and some utilities for, you'll notice them on the DOT inspector guys are driving some of the utility vehicles now. But like I said, for those reasons, that's all I can come up with, is that they're maintained. I don't want to say maintained better, but they're kept a closer eye on, and they were used by one person, one trooper.
Okay.
These cars, it's unfortunate, David. It's hit or miss. I mean, we stuck a car that's, I think the car that's going away. Don't quote me, but we just put in a transmission cooler into one of them, and I can't remember now if that's the one that's getting replaced or not, but for $800, but say, we don't have a choice. We only have so many cars, and it doesn't matter if it's 6 months before we replace it or really 2 months. We have to fix it because we have to drive it. We don't have anything else.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Any other comments? If not, I guess I'll make a motion to accept the bid with New Prague Ford for a replacement car.
Second.
Second by Mark Bartuszczyk. Any other comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Passes 5-0. Discussion of mayor and city council compensation. You want to take this, Mike?
Yeah, I'll take this, Mayor. That as background materials in your packet this evening is that there was discussion in 2013 that essentially reviewed a number of facets around the salaries, how they were identified as far as originally being adopted, the fact that it had been 14 to 15 years since they were last reviewed. Currently, they were never adopted by ordinance, just by simple motion. And in the review and discussion, it was talked about that we would take a look at gathering data from information from the League of Minnesota Cities, as well as we also did a surrounding neighboring city survey, as well as I believe it was Councilmember Scripture that raised a concern when she first came on about compensation and the council receiving golf course membership that the city attorney identified when we went through a number of other issues, I believe early last spring, was that at some point the council needed to really address that in the form of compensation. State law under the process, and we included in the packet, dictates that if there is to be a change in the overall compensation or salary, that it has to be done prior to the or there can't be any change until after the next succeeding municipal election. So when we had the discussion last year, it was talked about that the review would need to be done and any action taken before the election, and then it couldn't go into effect until after January of 2015 or January 1 of 2015. So using my tickler file that in the article that came out in the end of July in the Star Tribune just kind of raised the issue, and so we finished our survey information from the neighboring communities as well as the League of Minnesota cities that actually had voluntarily reported, and we've included all of that information in your packet. And so as you take a look at it, the acknowledgement under statute 415.11 allows the council to consider and fix their own salaries. However, it can't take effect until the next succeeding municipal election. So when you take a look at it, even though there isn't an ordinance in place right now, in my conversation with the city attorney, and I'll let him augment or add to it, is that technically the council's current salaries, even if there is no change, should probably be put into an ordinance format to make sure we're compliant with the state law as was brought up for discussion. In that process, I think as you take a look at it, all I can say is that it's been, the last action was in September of 1988, with those salaries being effective January 1 of 99. Nothing since then. We tried to garner most of the cities generally in the immediate area that most people would recognize. I think most everything is generally within about a 30-mile radius for the most part. There might be a few up to the northwest. We didn't pick up Waconia and some of the other ones up into that far-reaching part of it, but most of the ones in the near area, and I think you can see there's a significant kind of breaking point based on the size of the communities that are significantly larger than New Prague. Also provided you with information for those cities that reported between 5,000 and 10,000 for the mayor's position and council member's position, and so we've tried to give you a smattering of the high, median, low, and average salaries in those that reported. It doesn't mean that we've picked up all of those cities in that population range. Those are the only ones that we've reported to the League of Minnesota Cities. So the only other way to garner that other information would have been to send out a survey to each of those cities in that population class, which we didn't think it was necessary that the sampling of information, I think, generally gives you that overview. So it really is your choice and discussion where you want to go. My conversation with Scott on the topic suggests that whether you make any changes or not, it probably should be put into an ordinance format to comply with Chapter Law 41511. And then the other issue, we could not find specifically where there was council action historically dealing with the golf membership, but there's a value there that I think Scott would augment and tell you that needs to be considered if it's to be continued, that would have to be added to the compensation side of the package. And as we've been working with our auditor, we're now being advised that technically that's a benefit both to the elected and appointed employees, that we need to be picking that up as W-2 income for tax purposes as we go forward. So that's an overview and a summary. We don't have a specific recommendation, at least until the council had some discussion as to where you wanted to go. The timing relative to the election that occurs on November 4th is that you've got the introduction and the adoption of any ordinance, so that's 2 meetings, and then we've got a 30-day publication. So you're taking up almost 60 days in that process. So between now and November 4th, we've got about 90 days. So
Okay.
your choice, it's in your hands.
I was
Any-
just curious why we wouldn't use the cities we used for the compensation study. Why wouldn't we use those cities? Now we're using a different set of cities.
I just garnered all the cities in the 5 to 10,000 population range and those in our immediate area that certainly can gather that additional information if you would like.
Well, I kind of did it already, so, okay.
What'd you
I
find
only had
out?
to plug in about 4 of them.
What'd you find out?
That the average for the mayor is about $590 a month, and the average for the council is $427 a month.
Where were those cities, Pat?
They were Belle Plaine, Buffalo, Delano, Farmington, Glencoe, Hutchinson, Jordan, Litchfield, Northfield, Prior Lake, Rogers, Savage.
Which ones were different than were already on this
Shakopee,
list?
St. Peter, and Waseca.
Yeah, but a lot of those were on this list already. What were the different
Some,
ones? Buffalo, I
they
don't see
weren't
Buffalo.
on. Well, it just depends. They weren't all on the same list, isn't there? More than one.
Yeah, there's a list that Mike put together, and then one actually just dropped down from the League of Minnesotas.
Well, I had to set the parameters to be
Right.
able to get that between 5 and 10,000 population that, you know, the difficulty is trying to anticipate what range that the council wants to look at or what grouping you want to look at. I tried to get a representative sampling. That's all I tried to do.
Yes. Some of the cities you use, Pat, are over 10,000 though,
Oh, yeah,
so.
they are. But we use these for that compensation study, so, you know, to me, it's like it's compensation for us. Why wouldn't we use the same thing that we're using for the other employees, you know? That's just my thinking on,
If you have that, we can certainly take a look at that and rerun the analysis or relay it out if that's what you'd like.
yeah.
I think
It does end up being a little higher, but not that much.
Yeah, I think the issue when you use some of the cities and don't is when you're doing that comp study for the employees, some of them don't have utilities or, you know, electric, that sort of thing, and so you gotta, you know, try to get the best information. So that's why I think, you know, not that we couldn't have used it for this, but I think when the list that was picked for the comps survey was, we tried to get as many services that they offered as ours with the same generally close population to kind of give us a
And
better.
then the councils are dealing with the same kind of things then, too, you know. You
Yeah.
can look at it 2 ways. But the other thing, like, you know, when I worked for the city, we actually had an attorney's opinion about the free memberships for employees, and it came back, I want to say it was like in 2002 or 3 or 4 that we got this attorney's opinion. I'm assuming it was the city attorney at that time, or maybe the golf course had a separate one, I just don't remember. But what it came back was that there's this no additional cost services exemption from not having to have, actually it's a 1099, not a W-2. Okay? And here, I just kind of vaguely remembered it, so I Googled it and found it and went, oh yeah, this is what it was. And it says, some of the wording right from the IRS, it says, no additional cost services occur frequently in industries with excess capacity services. Examples include transportation tickets, like airlines, like if they give their employees, reduced rate or whatever, they don't pay taxes on that. Hotel rooms, entertainment facilities, etc. They may occur with governmental facilities as well. For example, a municipal golf course or a recreational center. So there is that. I don't know, Scott, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, so it's not necessarily true that there is a need for this 1099, right?
It has to be some accounting. It's either a 1099 or it's a W-2.
Yeah.
One way or the other under that scenario
But
as well.
this, under this no additional cost services, it's excluded from having to do that because it doesn't cost the city anything to provide that. That's what the attorney rendered,
I'm not familiar with what attorney rendered that. It wasn't my
Yeah.
office. Yeah, it has to be before my time. But it's one thing to say it's no additional cost to provide it, but it is a cost that is being provided as a benefit. That's what the auditors also looked at, as that same belief, belief. So we certainly can look at that and see if the IRS will say it fits within that realm. But one way or the other, you either have to establish that and make sure you have a ruling that supports that, or it is compensation.
yeah. But the attorney that did it before evidently excluded that. There were some other free memberships that had to get the 1099 miscellaneous, but not the employees.
Rationale, unless you have
Yeah.
the opinion.
And I didn't go out looking for this. This is
It
what's
was a
coming
big
from, this is coming
lengthy-
from our finance director in consultation with the auditor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're conveying to me, and as I reviewed it with Scott, the indication was that this is how we needed to look at potentially handling it. And so I'm not an expert in that area, don't profess to be. If you've got some information that you think we ought to look at, I'd be glad to take a look at it. I don't know what opinion you're talking about. I don't have, didn't have access to that. But in my review with Scott and with Patty in regards to her conversations with the auditors, she's telling me that for both employees and or elected officials, if we provide the golf membership, is that we have to identify that as compensation.
Okay. But, it was brought up before, and that's what was found out. And then I'm still finding it in the IRS information, so it just makes me wonder.
Well, maybe we should, get that.
Then all I can do is have the city attorney and the auditor talk and see if we can reach
No,
agreement on
yeah,
how to
I
handle
mean-
it, 'cause I'm,
And Patty should have that letter because I kept it all the years I was there and then turned it over, so it'd be somewhere.
got something that you think, based on prior experience, Pat, that I'd be more than happy to take a look at it, but that was the advice I was getting from our legal counsel and auditor.
Mhm.
Well, I'm just sharing what I knew about it, so it's kind of,
That's called, you said, no additional cost services? Got something, I'd be happy to take a look
Yeah.
at it.
I can give
You
it
know,
to you.
that doesn't have to be decided tonight, but that was the general gist of what was being provided.
Right. Well, just with my accounting background, I've always kind of, if there's value and you're getting value for nothing, IRS doesn't usually frown too well on that, but,
But in here.
yeah. But yeah, like, I think we need to look at some, if there's some court cases or something that might defend that, would be different, but, I don't know what everyone's opinion on, the salary issue. From my standpoint, when I got elected, I didn't know you got paid.
I was the same way.
So, when Patty asked me for a W-4, I said, what do you need a W-4 for? And she says, well, you get paid for this. I said, so from my standpoint, I I don't see that we need to increase. It seems like we're kind of in the middle of the road across the board. But that's just my opinion. So I guess, everyone can voice their opinion.
Well,
Go ahead, David.
I think it's been 15 years since there's been any adjustment to salaries. And personally, I feel that, like you, Chuck, when I first went on the council, I didn't think there was any salary for it. And I'm not here to get paid. I'm here to perform a service, I think, to the community. So whether I get $262 a month or zip, I don't care. In fact, I don't look at this. I just throw it in the drawer and Katie takes care of it. But I do feel that there is some value to what we're doing. And because that is the case, I feel that all council persons should get some remuneration for what we do. And I would think that after 15 years, the council deserves some sort of an increase. So I would be for raising the salary that council persons get. And if we want to look at some of the data that Pat included and put that in here, but Mike has got 48 different cities here, some of which is population 3-4 times what New Prague is. But then there's also communities in here that have 1/3 to 1/4 the population we do. So I think it's kind of a broad overview, and if you look at increasing it to what the median range is, it's not that much higher than what we get, but it's something. And I think that there's a value in doing that. So that's my opinion. Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that out of the 48 cities, we're ranked 38th. But I just saw this for the first time in our packet this weekend. I'd like to talk to some taxpayers and find out what their thoughts are. So even if we could, and I know Pat has some information that she's going to try to look up. I mean, if we could table it for 2 weeks, let us talk to the residents of New Prague and find out what their thoughts are on it. It is a lot of work, a lot more work than I think any of us did, but that we thought. But none of us, like you said, David, none of us signed up because we were expecting a big paycheck. So, but anyways, if we could get some more information and have an opportunity to talk to the residents and Pat gets her some additional information. I know we're on a time schedule, but if we pushed it back and gave us a couple weeks to look at this and figure it out, Mike, are we still we still have time to act? And
Yeah, that if, I think that the 30 days. But yeah, if, you've got the next meeting in August that you'd probably have to take action beginning in September. So you've got 2 meetings there. If you were to do something, ordinance has to be introduced at one, adopted at the next, and then we've got 30 days to publish that. So as Scott was referring, is that all has to be done before the election in November.
That the ordinance the 30-day window has to be. Yep.
I mean, I see some, I think all of us, in our attendance-wise, are probably in the 90 percentile range, but maybe even a little mid-90s. But I see that some cities, pay when, to show up. And, there's been in the past, there's been council members that might be in the 70 percentile range. And, at least we're, the people that are, that's one aspect to look at, whether or not we keep it low, but maybe pay for attendance and participation. Mind looking at that, some type of per diem like some of these other cities do. At least you're going to get people to show up. And we do have a tough time right now. We're in election mode, and I think I'm the only one that signed up so far to redo it, maybe if the,
Scared everybody away.
if the compensation was, if the compensation was higher, maybe we could get some more interest in the job too, even though it is a lot of work, and I don't know if you'll ever make the full wage that you probably should, but.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to base it on attendance, Sean, because it's attendance at what? The council meetings or all the many other meetings that we have to be, and what constitutes a special session, I guess? Because according to the chart, New Prague is supposedly pays for special sessions, at least according to one of these.
New Prague does?
No.
No, Belle Plaine does.
Belle Plaine
Jordan
does.
does.
Yeah, but somewhere in here I saw it.
Lonsdale.
Pay something, and then it's
Does.
more for special meetings.
You look on the last page 3 of our chart, we're number 38, New Prague. It's under the council members. If you go back under that column, it says additional payment for special meetings, $50. What's a special meeting?
Yeah,
I don't know where you're seeing
yeah, I
that.
was wondering about that
That's
too.
right here.
Basically, your regular meetings are your 2 meetings per month, the
The
first
last
and
page.
third Mondays.
But it says
Any-
50
Uh,
extra.
But I'm just saying, regular meetings would
I
be
gotta add
the
up all
first and
those
third.
meetings that I attended.
If you have any other budget meetings, workshop meetings or whatnot, those are considered a special meeting.
So then, on the next item on the agenda, you've got us down for 4 extra Mondays. That means then that those 2 months, we're gonna get another $100?
That must be a typo.
I just tried to identify the potential, looking at dates to conduct budget workshops. Didn't necessarily say you had to use all of those.
No,
I know, that's not my point, Mike. I'm
No, I think
saying
this-
that
I think
according to
this-
this chart,
All of them, then you get paid extra.
Is there a mistake on the chart? It says we get $50
yes,
for
we get
extra
50.
meetings.
Look on the last page of this handout, Mike, the very top line.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
think
it's
that's a
got to be a
typo,
typo because
yeah.
we've never had.
Well, I'm not aware of it, but according to this chart, New Prague,
It says $50.
He's been paying me all this time.
You've been getting it all? I think there's got to be a typo or some misinformation.
This is what the league put together. It comes out of their database when you put it in.
Under
I
the
assume.
resolution, there's a provision for extra meetings. Resolution
On our fee schedule?
schedule, but I think that if that's called, there's something, and I believe, if called,
I think if called by an applicant of some special item, I believe.
correct, not initiated by the city for that, that I think it was set up around the time, because it's also applicable for the planning commission. It was done during the development days.
Oh, so if they had a
Oh,
plot
so there
or
is
platted
something.
something.
Yeah, if a developer had a deadline to meet and they
Right.
suddenly needed to get everybody together, yeah, we do have that and
One
did
like
have
that,
that.
didn't we? Oh,
Well, I guess I
it's
kind of,
just a point of clarification, Mike. It's not something I'm demanding, but I'm just wondering what it was.
Sounds good to me.
Only thing that when I reviewed with Mary Jo, the resolution, I was asking the same question that, because I was not familiar with any extra pay for meetings, but I think in the resolution that we have, it was adopted a number of years ago during the development days, that if there was a developer requested initiation for additional meetings, I know the planning commission got paid, and that's the only thing I can think of that would tie to.
Okay, because planning commission doesn't get any reimbursement.
No, I think it's listed as a per diem. I was
Okay.
gonna look it up real quickly.
Okay, that's all right.
you know how you said the membership is worth $912? Well, you know, I have the senior membership, so mine's only worth $730. Just saying, I just want to say that.
All I tried to do was to give you.
we can't help that, Pat. You get a break
Well, there
every
are,
time.
like, if you pay early versus you pay late, there's like 4 different amounts.
Well, I think, again, we can, I think and I agree with Sean, maybe we should, discuss this more in detail at the next meeting. Maybe we can get some clarification to the point you brought up, Pat, with that, and then, just kind of get some feedback from, citizens in what they feel that is, and since we do have some time, we can, maybe have a little better discussion at the next meeting.
Well,
But
this,
I have, I'm sorry.
But no, go ahead.
I
spoke.
have mentioned how much I make a month here, but just different times visiting with people, and they think it's funny.
Funny.
They go, really? That's what you get?
Oh, well, yeah,
So anyway.
right.
I think this is a really good opportunity to advise the people that, at least those few that listen to these sessions, to hear us talk about what we get or what we don't get. And if you're going to go out and ask them, well, it depends on who you ask. Like some people have said to me, you mean you only get X number of dollars for all the work you do? Yeah. Some people think it's ridiculous. And you'll find some people that say, well, you guys shouldn't get anything for it, which is fine with me. I don't care. But
Yeah,
so,
there's got to be that happy medium.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I agree.
because it is time consuming, I think that's,
Very much so.
that people, may or may not realize that it does take time. But I think both Dave and Sean said it, is that we didn't sign up to get for a paycheck. We're doing a service to the community. And but if no one has a disagreement on tabling this till the next meeting so we can get an answer on Pat's issue versus on the memberships, and
Yeah,
if people want to get some feedback on from people as they have conversations with them.
I wish we'd get rid of the memberships, even divide it out and maybe add that to it. It would make sense that way then.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wish we'd either get rid of the employee free membership, and maybe even maybe the expense could come out of the department. And I think you've mentioned that to me before a long time ago, that maybe the department should pay for that benefit rather than the golf course always taking the hit for it. They don't have any money, and
Well, there should be, in theory, should be an allocation.
an allocation.
In my
or pay for it.
my opinion, if one department's getting a bunch of free memberships, that department should take an allocation to help the golf course, because they're basically subsidizing.
Historically, and I don't know the case here in Prague, but I've been in other cities that have had municipal recreation centers, and they've provided free single memberships to the employees for that, and there is no cost allocation anywhere. The city owns the operation, runs it, and whether you give it to the employer or not, that there is not a cost directly incurred by providing that, and it was a stimulus to encourage health, wellness type items is why they're typically provided, whether it be golf or rec center or what have you. Whether you would choose to turn around and start trying to budget that, then that's another story in the process.
No, and I agree with that, but it's just the accountant in me is when, some other department, if you look at it and companies have VPs of all these departments. If one was getting something free that could be allocated to the other department, they'd be going, this ain't happening. I'm going to charge you back for the 10 memberships. It's just the accounting mindset. I mean, does it have to be done? No. I'm just saying that's really, when you look at the golf course is really an enterprise fund. It'd be like giving someone free water. It'd be like you should allocate that cost of that water to the department, whoever's that person's in that department. And again, that's just the accountant talking to me. That's
Maybe that's why I feel that way too.
you have costs, you gotta allocate them out. Especially when you're talking different budgets, and
Yeah.
that's just how I've always done it in my private professional
And
career.
we didn't always have those free memberships for any city employee that wanted one. We didn't always have that.
I'm just saying, historically, the impetus in many cities that have enterprise operations, whether it be the rec center, the golf course, or other types of recreational features, is that they looked at that as a benefit and provided to the employees under our personnel policy, and didn't account for it, didn't expense it, or do anything of that nature. Whether you choose to change that, that's entirely within your parameters. In attempting to change that, however, it is also in the police union contract that would have to be a negotiable item.
Right.
Right.
No.
Is
We
there
want
any
a
kind of
motion.
information out there, what cities do actually give out like that in fringe benefits?
I can't honestly say,
'Cause
because
I
I've
never-
not done any kind of research on that kind of benefit.
I move we table this until the next meeting.
Second.
Okay. A motion and a second to table it, and that time hopefully we'll get an answer on Pat's question, on, what is that called, Pat?
The 1090, the no additional cost
There,
services?
no additional cost services, and maybe some clarification on the membership deal, so. Got a motion and a second. Any other further comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, we'll table and we'll put it on the agenda for the 18th. Next, discussion of budget workshop dates.
My intent here was to, based on past years, was to identify an outline of a schedule, whether they're all needed or not, was simply to try to allow people to look ahead, not knowing what all of your individual schedules were, to conceptually take a look at the timing and what might be occurring so that people can plan accordingly. We need to typically adopt the preliminary property tax levy and review the general fund budget and the debt service budgets. And historically, the last day to do that was September 15th. That's now been extended to September 30th. Patty and my preference would not be to go that late, if at all possible. And we're in the process of assembling all the departmental budgets that came in here as of the end of July, and are expecting that we're going to have something for you in the latter part of August to be reviewed at the first part of September. Whether you want to do that in a couple hours ahead of the regular meeting that is on Tuesday the 2nd, which would mean we'd have to go from at least 5 to 7 probably, or whether you do that on the evening in a special meeting on Monday the 8th. The intent is that we adopt that on September 15th, and then typically I would begin to work with the departments to refine that preliminary general fund budget, with starting to come to you in the 1st of October at the first budget workshop on or around October 13th. So whether we need those dates or not, it was just an attempt to outline from a scheduling standpoint so you had some idea, and it's just taking the off Mondays is all it does. So really, it's the first one is all we need to set for tonight, so that I've got some direction to look at what we're going to do to work with you on getting that preliminary levy adopted, hopefully by September 15th.
So September 8th is the one we're looking at right now.
Or we could do before the September 2nd meeting.
I'd rather do it on the 8th and
So otherwise it gets so long.
it's, 4-hour meeting.
I'd rather do it on the 8th too.
Unless Mike can promise us a small agenda on one of those Monday nights.
Actually, that's a good negotiation tool.
When did we start it last year?
Same time frame.
September.
Because I thought we were so crunched in the end.
We were, because we had one meeting that didn't get held because we didn't have a quorum.
We should plan
Somebody
for
didn't
that
show
and
up.
do it earlier.
Well, I think we should, to me, let's get one meeting, let's just schedule the September meeting so that we can set the levy.
September 8th,
How does
Yes.
September 8th look for?
5:30.
I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Council meeting.
And Dave can't make the 8th.
Well, at this point, I don't know if I can.
Okay. I would like to do the 2nd, but if you think that's going to be too long, then you're only dedicating one night. And we've been running, unless something ungodly changes, our meetings have been running
Well, this
hour and
first
a
one
half
is-
anyways.
This first one is primarily just to set the levy, and Patty, and my expectation is I'm hoping we're coming in with no increase in the general fund or the golf or the EDA levy and/or debt service, The only piece we have to account for is the tax abatement for Chart, which is going to be coming out of their property taxes, but we're also seeing enough of an increase on their valuation that will offset that increase. So we're basically hoping for a no increase levy with the exception of the Chart tax abatement. And with the valuations that we're expecting, I'm hoping that in the end, the levy will go down even as that is a starting point. So that's my hope. I haven't seen all the documents from Scott County and LeSueur yet, but that's our hope and expectation based on preliminary valuations that we've seen. So we're shooting for another year with no increase in the levy. The Chart piece is that all of their new value will be coming back online, and so we've got a 10-year tax abatement to offset that increased value.
What do you think, Sean?
We have a
I
decrease.
suppose let's do the second, if that works.
How about a
We're-
decrease in taxes?
Well, we're just setting the levy. What we actually, finally, we're just telling the state this is what we're planning to do. Now, obviously, once we do the final approval, that will be in December.
Can we start a? We have in past years. When I first started, we've X'd out a lot of things.
Yeah, you got-
A lot of arguing, but we did. Can we get done if we start at 5:30?
On,
The second,
Before the regular meeting.
before the regular meeting.
we can try. The other part of that is that you could continue, if we have a short agenda, you could continue that into the balance of the meeting at the end of the meeting if we had to.
Okay,
Do that.
So-
Then you can be here, Dave.
yep,
Yeah, all
the
right,
second
for
at
that.
5:30.
And why can't we plan out budget meeting or workshop number 1 and 2? I'd like to get that on the calendar too, even if it's in October already, just so I can. Yeah,
I don't know.
on the offset number 1 on the Monday after the first meeting, and then budget workshop number 2 on the. It would be every Monday in October
Tuesday,
with either a council
September
meeting or a
2nd.
budget workshop, but.
I've kind of planned on them for 6 years now anyway, so that's just kind of the way it goes, so.
Well,
If
I'd
you
like
get, if
to-
you get one off, you give yourself an attaboy.
So we can plan those October meetings then as well?
I would pencil them in.
For the 13th and 27th?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll pencil those in as people know their schedule's closer than, based on, just in the October ones.
Budget workshop ones.
Council night?
Those get a little bit longer.
Okay.
And we're bringing people in to talk and things like that, and I think we'd be rushing too fast to try to get too much done.
And what time would they be at? 5:30?
Whatever time you want to start at.
Yeah, that
A lot
way.
of times we start those at 5, I think. But, I mean, we can start at 5:30.
Yeah, why don't we,
Yeah, I think 5:30 works a little easier.
yeah, that
for
way
me.
if someone's got outside business, they're usually done by 5, so, okay,
5:30?
yes.
Say all those again in case I missed something.
They're the
On the
the orange
13th,
ones on that calendar.
yeah, in October, we're talking the 13th and the 27th, starting at 5:30, and then I would,
In
Plan-
September 2nd.
at 5.
in September 2nd at 5:30 for the levy, the initial levy one. That's all we got dialed in right now. Okay, good. Next on the agenda, consent agenda. Any questions in items in the consent agenda?
I just had one quick one. The, under the open invoices, there was $990 for Yackley cabin damage. What was that? I don't
That
know if
was,
I heard about that.
We have a accident report from last fall on that, late last fall.
Okay.
Person was at the Casey's gas station. Don't know the medical end of it, but he had a stroke or something, flew across Second Street, ended up in the Ackley Cabin Park area, did a bunch of damage. They were billed, they personally paid the bill.
Okay.
But because of the time of year, we couldn't get in there to do the repairs till this spring. And then naturally with all the rain, we didn't want to rip everything up, so we waited this long to do it.
Oh, okay.
So the bill's actually been paid by the person that had this accident.
Yeah, I just hadn't heard, I didn't know that occurred, so.
Yep, there's a police report on it and everything.
That was it.
Any other questions on the consent agenda items? If not, I guess I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Dave Brusick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, miscellaneous. Mark, anything?
Think of.
Okay, Glenn?
Construction project's going pretty good. If anybody's driven through there, the asphalt's down. They got black dirt behind the curb. They hopefully will be putting down sod yet this week. Otherwise, first part of next week is what they're telling us. They got second lift on last year's project. They got some punch list items left to do on this year's project yet, but they've been working at it, so starting to look pretty good.
When are they gonna start that trail?
That should be starting in the next week or two.
Chart doing that? I can't remember.
Chart is doing that, yes. Yep.
Then they put the second overlay on the 2013?
They did.
Yep.
Yep, that happened last Friday.
Awesome.
Yep, that turned out pretty good. So that's all I got.
Ken?
Nothing.
Took care of the thistle problem, thank you.
You're welcome.
Young lady, or a lady gave me a call about some thistle issues, but Ken took care of them. So. Anything, Pat?
Yeah, I was wondering when we might be talking about whether the retirees are going to be getting something from the comp study once it's done. Well, can we talk about that next week, or can we?
That would come when you talk about the implementation of the whole thing, that you would take a look at that decision-making as part of that.
Well, I just think the retirees, deserve to know what's happening with it. I don't know why we can't make the decision before October.
You're assuming they're gonna get a pay increase. You don't know that. They might
No,
come
we
back
don't
the
know that,
exact
but
opposite, so.
If it was.
Well, I mean, but without that information, are you gonna promise them something that might not ever occur? So we
Well,
really need
if it
that compensation
does.
study. Well, then we can talk about it at that time. I mean, I think that's probably the way you,
That the way you feel, Dave?
Well, I had asked Scott previously if there was some, assuming that the retirees would be getting an increase, what could the council do about it? This was supposed to have been completed, in my opinion, a long time ago, and it's now in its 15th or 16th month. So I asked Scott legally, what can a council do? Can the council make a decision to give something to retirees prior to the time we vote on it? Could we go back in time and say maybe from January 2014, can we benefit them what salary they should have gotten earlier? Or do we have to do it from the time in which we, let's say we find out from all this data in October or November? Do we have to go from that date forward? That was just my question to Scott.
Right, when Dave asked that when we were at City Hall for one of the other meetings, classic attorney answer.
Use the microphone.
Because it really
Can you use the microphone?
Okay.
Thank you,
The
Scott.
classic answer is it really depends, because you're going, and to Sean's point, you're going to have to make that assumption you are giving something and you're adjusting each of those classes forward and what effect it would have on each individual position, but also on labor contracts and things like that. So it's a fairly broad question. The short answer is yes, potentially something can be done. It's going to really depend on how you look at it. I'm not sure that's how a lot of compensation studies result, but you do make adjustments. Many times there are real-time snapshots moving forward, which I think was what you were saying. That that's a discretionary decision you five will have to make. But if there's a determination to go that route after your discussion, we'll figure out how that can be done. But it will be unique to different people who have retired. It depends on how far back in time you're going, so there'll be a lot of variables you'll have to look at and decide how you're going to treat. But it's possible, yep.
Anything else, Pat? Dave?
Nothing.
Don?
Nope.
Mark?
I just saw something. What was the temporary on-sale liquor license for October for St. Juan's? What does that have to do with?
That's the 100th the centennial of the school building.
Okay.
That the old school building will be 100 years old at that time, and
Oh, that's right.
the Alumni
1914.
Association
Okay.
is going to throw a little festivity. So
Okay.
that's what that's for.
That's all I got. I just noticed it.
Mike, do you have anything?
Day that we got a response from the Comcast cable people in regards to the letter that Bob Vos had sent. He basically indicated that, as we knew, they won't reimburse the city's costs on the legal fees for the transfer process, which we were pretty much expecting they wouldn't. Most of the information they said we either already had, or we could go to a number of different websites to take a look at. The response we received was the same as it went to all the other Comcast Minnesota cities. Bob is going to be drafting one more clarification letter for us that'll be going out either late this week or early next week. So nothing really new. Provided you the response, though, in case you were looking for a little light reading.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
God, do you have anything else?
Not other than the follow-up meeting we have later, nope.
Okay. Mary Jo? Chuck, this is your chance to shine, buddy. You're on cable TV, but. Okay, I don't have anything else, so I guess I'll make a motion to go into special session, right?
No, close this
Close
one.
this
Oh,
meeting.
and
close
do the
this one?
special
Okay.
meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I got a second by Dave Brusick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, we're out of that. And do we have to make a motion to go into close?
No, it's a separate meeting, you'd open from that point.
Okay.
But it will be a meeting that you will come back on the record after, it will be open. Depending on what the council does, there is a ability to come back in an open session at that point.
Okay.